First, I want to thank you for coming over here, Ajamu Baraka. Really appreciate that. I really just have just one question because I believe, the community kind of know about violence and, we see it on a regular basis. But I got this one question. What's your campaign violence prevention strategy overall?
No.
Okay, that's my question.
Okay, I'm T.O. I'm grateful to be here today. I want to salute you for running for Vice President Jill Stein and the great politician. Just to say I'm not here politically for myself today, but I ran for governor in the state of Illinois in 2014 and we secured 30% of the state vote. In spite of all the odds against me, people thought I was crazy when I told them I was going to run for governor, but I took care of business anyway. It was like me against the world, okay? And that's just, I just want to say that. But when it comes down, I'm the president of Violence and Weapons Incorporated. And a lot of people talk a good game about stopping violence in Chicago, but most people aren't responsible, which dictates coming after the fact. What kind of programs would you take a look at when you become the Vice President of the United States as it relates to being able to address the issue of violence on the front end, opposed to always being in the response mode? And I don't want nobody to take this comment here the wrong way. I'm just dealing with facts. I'm not anti-police, I want to make that clear, but the police cannot stop killings in the African-American community because the police have been in response mode for over 100 years, which dictates coming after the fact once again. And that's not an anti-police statement, it's just the facts. Okay, so how can we address this increasing homicide rate and really bring about the necessary solutions to help reduce violence in cities like Chicago, Baltimore, St. Louis, Memphis, Houston? You got a lot of cities struggling, Philadelphia. So how can we deal with that? Ask the audience. And if the audience have any questions, let me know. That's my boss over there. But if the audience has any questions, feel free to ask questions as well. You want them to ask questions now? Okay, does the audience have any questions on the issue of violence?
Yes, speaking of violence, on the global level, currently the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton are using very inflammatory rhetoric towards Russia. So my question is, how will the Stein-Baraka administration address that issue and avoid nuclear world war?
That's a good question.
Also, yeah, I want to go global also. Hillary Clinton has been giving weapons to Indonesia and I'm probably going to say this wrong, to kill off and take land from Powwow people, the Powwow village, P-A-U-W-A, Powwow, and these are black. Somebody say it?
Papua New Guinea.
That's New yeah. And supplying weapons to Indonesia against this village of black people to kill them and take their land. Yeah, so just the murder and the mayhem that Hillary Clinton is causing around this continent when it comes to violence against black people definitely needs to be looked at.
Good question. Okay, you got one more over here, one in the back. Right to the fence.
I had a question in regards to prisons in America. I think the stats are well known in terms of people being locked up. We have a lot of people locked up for non-violent crimes. I guess I'm thinking a lot in regards to marijuana. So I guess I have a question in regards to how you feel about prison reform.
We got one more question in the back. We'll get back to the camera. Quite a few questions. You guys hands in the back? Oh, you got it? Okay, you come on, bro.
Yeah, prison reform is one thing, bail reform is another. I'd like to know if you have any policies or thoughts around reforming the bail system.
So it's the bail system. Then we got one more hand here. The young lady, now get to the mic.
Yeah, I had a question. There was a recent Guardian poll that said 53% of millennials would rather see a meteor hit the earth than a Hillary or Trump presidency. That is humorous, but I I think it's very telling
Right.
for our young people how pointless they see society to be. And my question is not just on an electoral basis, how can we enact true system change? Because if we have an entire generation of young people, and I would fall into that category of millennial, I'm 25 years old, I have a 4-year-old son. We have an entire generation of young people who don't see the point in the planet existing. And then we have a billionaire elite who's destroying the planet. You know, what is real changes? Because I think it goes beyond just policies. There is something truly wrong with our society when you have an entire generation of young people who just don't see change possible, or rather just see a meteor hit than either a political party. So I guess what true systemic change can we create to give our young people who are engaging in this violent behavior a vision for a new society?
All right, you putting a heavy oil on the man, so we got to do this. Let me do this 1 minute, Jeff. I got you. Let me get Lamont, then my brother, and then we get Jeff. And then that'll be a wrap for the remaining questions, okay? Come on, brother Lamont.
What steps are going to be taken to end the school to prison pipeline?
School to prison pipeline. That's a good one. Solid, okay? Get that, brother.
So could you better educate us on the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement that's coming and that's been talked about in a number of different circles that really haven't been talked about in the debate between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump? And how do we incorporate a more fair international trade system where communities can better connect with foreign nations around trade to help build wealth? One of the issues with communities like Inglewood is that if I wanted to try to set up some type of import-export, the bureaucracy around it, because of limited capital, limited resources, becomes a major issue, and therefore our business access to creating jobs and so forth in a community like Inglewood is hampered, is pretty much suppressed.
All right, good enough. Then brother Jeff.
All right, so I thought we were talking about, what was the topic? Okay, so, no, everybody pivoted. We went from political violence to, transatlantic violence. So I'm gonna throw mine in there. I'm going back to political violence. You said a couple of things earlier today that really struck me, a couple of words, I wrote them down. You kept saying decision-making position. And then you talked about structural change. As a former candidate in a room amongst many former candidates, I think we probably all experienced in this town the power of money over elections. The power of money over elections is I don't even have a word for it, especially in this town when we start talking about Madigans, when we start talking about generational power distribution. Money ain't nothing but a tool to get power, to make sure you continue to have money to keep power. And in this town, they have worked it to perfection. So, on the federal level, on the national level, I want to hear a campaign talk about stopping this political violence. And I want to hear somebody talking about campaign finance reform, getting money out of elections. So that regular folk like you, real folk like you, real folk like me, that ain't paid off and bought, have an opportunity to get in those decision-making positions. So what are we going to do about campaign finance reform? What are we going to do about this ridiculous idea that we can vote on a computer and everything is just all right? We should just believe whatever came out the computer. What are we going to do about this idea that more people can vote for one person, but our electoral college said this one over here is going to win? Those are my three issues, and I think those three issues will allow us to take the steering wheel and actually get real people in the decision-making process so we can change this. Does your campaign, does the Green Party address those three things? Because Barack Obama said it 3 times as he was running in 2008, And I don't think he's put campaign and finance and reform in the same sentence since.
Before Baraka responds to the questions, I want to thank the Green Party for opening up this particular session tonight, because you're not going to get this at a Trump town hall meeting. That's what it's all about. Everything else is staged outside of meetings like this. I just want to salute the Green Party for this, and we'll turn it over to
Y'all know how to work a brother.
Right.
And so very, very important questions. Let me see if I can deal with them, and where I fall down, please help me up. But I'll begin with that first question around how do we deal with, and can we in fact prevent violence? And I'm gonna relate that, my response to the sister's comment related to sort of changing, or what I call changing the value system, how we give young people something to really be prepared to struggle for. For me, they are connected, and that is that, you know, when I was a knucklehead running the streets here in Chicago, there was a young man, his name was Fred Hampton. Fred, young man, Fred said that we have a responsibility to our communities. That's something that resonated with me. When he had young people stand up and say, I am a revolutionary, that meant something to many of us. I say that the only way we deal with the issue of violence in our community is when our young people have the hope, have the understanding of their objective responsibility historically to our people. Until we have a situation where our people are in motion, are in struggle, inspired by new sets of values. When our young people understand that they are in fact the frontline troops in our struggle for revolutionary change, then we're going to see a reduction in the violence in our communities. Yeah. Look, historically, and this might sound like pie in the sky, but I would challenge you to look at movements around this world and look at movements in this country. That when people began to organize and resist, when they engage in the process of personal and collective transformation, the first thing that happens is there is a reduction in crime and internalized violence. Internalized violence is part of the experience of oppression. Not only do we turn on ourselves, but we are involved in this struggle to survive, and the folks who we then sort of identify in order to prey on are folks close to us. You know, so we slip in our neighbor's apartment window. You know, we rob folks who are on the way going to the store to get some food for their family. You know, we struggle over the control of territories that we can, you know, make our money. That's all part of the trick bag that oppression puts us in. So when we begin to organize ourselves and engage in struggle, we'll see a transformation in our community. It sounds like pie in the sky, but it's actually relatively simple. The main challenge, though, is getting to a point where we have that kind of transformational politics, and that takes struggle, because folks are disconnected and turned off and angry. Young folks in this society recognize that nobody really cares about them. In fact, they understand and know that most of the folks really don't like them. In fact, they hate them. Come on. Okay. And so, you know, trying to win folks over to struggle is part of that challenge. Now, that's happening, though. We see that, you know, with the current resistance movements here in this country. In particular, you know, all of the resistance that gets wrapped up in this thing called Black Lives Matter movements. we see that there's motion, okay? Now, that's going to deepen. It's going to deepen because they have no other choice but to deepen it, because, you know, it's not just about being concerned about police violence, but people are recognizing the issue of structural violence. And they are recognizing that the system is organized against us, and that we're not going to be able to deal with violence in our communities and violence coming from the state until we in fact have real revolutionary change in this country. So when we start talking about a new kind of politics, when we start challenging ourselves and our young people to recognize that we have to fight, that we have to have new values, that we have to construct a new kind of vision, and recognize that we have to struggle for that vision, then we are on the way to a new kind of politics and a new kind of behavior in our community. And I really truly believe that. So all of the changes and programs that people advocate for, I think are important in terms of how we try to prevent violence. But you know, in some ways, they kind of are like band-aids. You know, these gaping wounds. You know, we got to think about this, I think, in different ways. Our young folks are angry. And I gotta say that if I was young, I'm angry already, but I was even more angry. If I was young with what appears to be no hope. And you know, and I know all that for me to be able to survive, I gotta be out here in the streets. You know? I gotta be hard and tough. You know? And I know the people are scared and they don't like me. So we got to deal with these kinds of internal contradictions. When we start building new revolutionary movements, we'll see a change in our communities. Now, you know, the other question was connected to this notion of state violence and connecting that to violence around the world. And I think that's the proper connection. That we can't talk about trying to end violence in the U.S., violence in our community, without talking about the violence in this culture, and without talking about the kind of violent activity that this state is involved in globally. You know? We have a culture that is committed to violence, a culture committed to dominance, a culture committed to militarism. You can't talk about you are concerned about the proliferation of weapons in the U.S., you're going to the black communities and other places, and then not say anything about the fact that the #1 exporter, producer, and exporter of weapons is the United States. It's a moral contradiction. Okay? You know, so we have to make those connections. You can't have people pretend that they are concerned about Black Lives Mattering in the U.S. while they bomb and kill black and brown bodies around the world. We have to make those kind of connections. I'm so glad to get these kind of questions because it shows that people are in fact making those kind of connections. When the movement for Black Lives Matter said, you know, we stand up with our brothers and sisters in Palestine, that was revolutionary. We have some Negroes and people who are confused saying, yo, why y'all concerned about Palestine? We got to be concerned with our folks here. Well, there's a connection because, you know, what they recognized was that there are some common enemies. That the colonization of Palestinians is very similar to the kind of colonized spaces we have here in the U.S. And that the same transnational European elite, you know, we are under their thumbs and their boots here the same way the Palestinians are in Palestine, or what some people refer to as Israel. So those kinds of connections we have to make. We have to make. We have to talk about U.S. policy in places like Colombia. We got to talk about a U.S. state that can go into the African continent and destroy the most prosperous nation on the planet, in Africa, Libya. You know, we got to talk about a state that talks about it supports human rights and is exceptional, while they support backward and violent regimes like the Saudi Arabia. You know? We have to make those kinds of connections. We used to make those kinds of connections. And we used to be very clear about U.S. policy. But I think that one of the consequences of our dear brother Barack Obama's tenure in office is that we get profoundly confused as black folks. That Barack Obama helps to facilitate a real move to the right. And for the first time, you know, when we used to be very suspicious when we would see the U.S. make a move internationally. We were like, we don't know about that. We know, what they're really all about. Well, when those same kinds of backward and aggressive moves were being made by the U.S. state under Barack Obama, we were like, go USA, USA, So he helped to move politics to the right, and he helped to undermine our moral standing and our moral positions. And that is something that I'm never going to forget about. All right. Now, that connection between the domestic and the international is absolutely necessary. And that's what we have to consider that when we think about this holding our nose and voting for Hillary Clinton. That's what we have to talk about when we talk to our friends who are prepared to support Hillary Clinton. That, this commitment that the U.S. state has to maintain its hegemony by the use of war, that's the kind of state violence we have to be opposed to. So again, these kinds of connections have to be made. The violence that we are struggling against is also manifest in other kinds of institutional practices, including the prison industrial complex. It is really backward that we have 2.1 million people incarcerated here in this country. And then when you add folks who are on probation and parole, it goes up to like 7 million people under the control of the state. That's something we've got to understand, that it didn't just happen because we have some bad people in power, but it's part of the kind of state violence, it's part of oppression. That, we have to recognize a very painful position. And that is that often in the current state of affairs, that young, and that's so young, black bodies have more value in prison than in participating in the private economy. You take a young person who may be able to secure a job at a minimum wage, and they make it with like $15,000 so a year. It means you can basically consume and buy about $15,000 worth of goods and services in the private economy, right? You take that same black body and put it in prison. It is generating in goods and services $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. Wow. So we are more valuable in prison than in the private economy. And then when you connect that to the fact that for the first time in U.S. history, black labor is unnecessary. You see, we always caught hell in this country, but we didn't really have to face full genocide because we played a particular role in the economy. Black low-wage labor was valuable. We played a role. In 2016, we're not needed, folks.
Come on, man.
So as a consequence, we are talking about our people who are now being perceived by the captains of industry as basically being redundant, superfluous. That's why we have the kind of state violence we have in this country. That's why we are more valuable locked up than walking so-called free. That's why, unfortunately, it's not going to change anytime soon. Therefore, we have to recognize that we are, in fact, at war.
Say that. Say that.
So while we talk about reducing violence in our community, we have to talk about that. But we also have to understand that we are, in fact, in a war footing. And what we have to do is to make sure that we can survive as we are under attack. That again goes back to the absolute necessity for us to be organized and the absolute imperative for us to be able to explain to our young folks the role that they have to play in this fight. Okay? School to prison pipeline. That is another one of the mechanisms they use to populate the prison system. This notion of zero tolerance is backward. This idea that you go to our communities and you have to go through you have these cops in the prisons, in the schools. Metal detectives, cops in the school. Our people being conditioned to accept institutionalization. Okay? And this notion that, some kids can get into a fight, and then you end up being funneled into the system. That is just objectively backward. If that was the case, many of us wouldn't have survived at all the fighting stuff we used to do. But right now they have no tolerance for our young people. And what's backward about this, even more so, my friends, is that the administrators of these kinds of backward and repressive practices are us.
Come on.
Us. Now, why is that the case? Well, I will argue that for the first time again in our history, we have a lot of first-time stuff now, that there's been a change in the internal class system within the black community. You take a black colony like here in Chicago, South Side Chicago, West Side Chicago. We grew up and black folks, were sort of running things, teachers and own stores and gas stations and all that, and we had a class structure. We had a middle class, or some people might call it petty bourgeoisie. We had a bourgeoisie. We had our black doctors and lawyers. And they were all connected to us. They existed because of that organic connection to us. Now, I would argue that outside of Chicago and some other places, that's all been changed now. Now we have a black petty bourgeoisie, a professional and managerial elite that has no organic connection to the black community.
Come on.
They have their jobs in corporations and in the state. They don't live in our communities anymore.
That's right.
And they have no psychological or emotional connection to us. It's the same thing with the big so there's a change in the class structure. So, where at one point we have to go to the housing authority and struggle to try to get some services in public housing or to protect public housing, and the authorities were always European. But of course, that's not the case anymore. We are now the administrators. And I've seen so many of these painful and weird, bizarre kinds of scenes. You got black folks, poor folks in the audience, begging public officials not to tear down their community. And you look up and you got all these folks dressed like me, sitting up there, listening to this stuff, and already determined. Right. Right about that. And so we've got to talk about this. That's why, I'm all for black folks. I love black folks.
I love black folks too. I love it.
But not all of them. I think pigmentation politics is something we've got to transcend, folks. And we're not talking about class as part of analysis of the kind of politics we have to engage in. Then all we're going to end up doing is confusing our people. I know we only got a minute or two. So the last thing, TPP, I want to just talk about that quickly. And again, y'all some very sophisticated folks. We don't get this kind of question going.
Welcome to Chicago.
specific partnerships very important. That's part of that process of the transnational European elite attempting to maintain its power. You know, they are shifting to Asia. They want to engage and they want to build this so-called fair trade agreement that's going to undermine workers and workers' rights in this country, continue the process of driving down wages here, but also do the same in all of the countries that are part of that agreement. You know? So not only that, this agreement also completely undermines democracy. It gives full power to corporations to undermine and dismantle all kinds of democratic decisions made by people. So that's something we have to oppose to. We say to Hillary Clinton, who pretends to be opposed to the TPP, if you're really opposed to it, Ms. Clinton, tell your Democrats, you are now the head of the Democratic Party. Tell your Democrats, you oppose any attempt to pass the TPP during the next lame duck session of Congress. Say that if you're really opposed to it. But she won't. You know why? Hillary Clinton, like Barack Obama, are both neoliberal capitalists who believe in that philosophy and that approach to economics. And that's just the way it is. They're not bad or evil people. That's their ideological orientation. But we got to understand that and recognize that.
Did you answer my question?
We have no specific programs except to say we got to get organized. We got to start.
That's right. Okay, now we're on, and we're going to move very quickly, which is number 4, economic development and community. Your presenters is Helen and Kenya. For state rep as an independent in the last election. An independent Democrat. So she can get on the ballot. And Helen has been advocating in Inglewood her whole life. And I just thought that she would be best. Now she went into Inglewood so well than to ask about the economic and the community development piece. So,
Thank you, Darlene. Like I said, yeah, I just want to say, is Jeff still in the room? Oh, okay. So, again, I'm Kenyatta Nicole Bond. I ran for state rep in 6th District right here in Inglewood.
I know you.
And, again, the machine is real. I got over 4,500 votes with no money, knocked on doors.
But the streets love you.
I believe that if I capitalize on those 4,500 people that believe in me, we can make a real change. And again, you're right, that machine is real. Mike Mannigan said he didn't care who won in my race as long as it wasn't me. So he was afraid that I'm going to do the right thing. And so remember that name, Kenyatta. All right. So I thank you for being with us tonight, sir. Just to piggyback on what I just said about the machine, does the Green Party have a department of division or a mechanism that assists grassroots organizers to do local economic development projects? This, I believe, will help to build your party from the bottom up while doing long-term political education instead of showing up doing election season as Republicans and Democrats do. They're knocking the door, they want your vote, right? You don't see them no other time. It's about the turkeys and right. So grassroots is really important, you know. So we hope that you win. We're going to support you. But when we don't win, would you be around? This party be around to help those grassroots organizations? You got a question? Yeah. I know you got a question.
Yeah, my name is Helen, everybody, and I didn't run for office, but I think everyone in here knows me from running my mouth about everything, okay? So, yeah, my question, of course, you know, I'm going global with this question, and I want you to explain global economics. We talked about this earlier. A couple of weeks ago, Inglewood had a Whole Foods open up in our community on 63rd and Houston. So the mayor from London was there with the mayor from Chicago.
and they was reporting, and this mayor, some of the vendors that was, whose products will be in Whole Foods, Inglewood, this mayor, the mayor from London, Sadad Kane, he was asking some of the vendors there, how would they like their products on stores in London, okay? So that's global, right? And we're in a global society. Whenever I read, because I read a lot of, and I read about what's going on outside of the United States, because it is going to affect us. I don't know, and I'm gonna put this out here, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Baraka. If anyone saw the president's last speech to the UN, and I'm just gonna read that just real quick. Anyway, yes, this is just an excerpt from his, and I encourage everyone to go and see his last speech to the UN. In his final appearance at the UN Security Council, he gave a speech landing globalism, okay, saying Americans should give up some freedom and submit to international governments. Okay, that means a lot. You know, we may not even be America anymore. I don't know.
Okay, my next question. So where in the United States or around the world can we, here in Inglewood, find examples or models to be studied for sustainable community development?
Yeah.
She mentioned the UN. I have another question. Should the United States government provide reparations economically to African American communities as the UN suggested? Any questions from mine? I got some more.
All right, I got a good question. Since we're talking global economics, first of all, it doesn't really matter where you shop at because there's still only 2 or 3 distributors, no matter where you go globally. That's why you can go to Food for Less and all the cans say Kroger. The question I have is, what are we going to do about the sanctions that they have in West Africa? If anybody in here does the Forex, you'll realize you can trade with any nation in the world except the 13 nations on West Africa. So when you start talking about sister cities, you start talking London and New York or LA and Japan, there is no sister city. We don't even have a sister city with who's supposed to be our sister countries, which are countries like Sierra Leone and Liberia. So we can't set up anything there to help stimulate their economy for them to stimulate ours. So that's one question. That's my question for you. And then I have a question for everybody in here. Who got the pack? Like, for real, because this Inglewood, man, we know how to move a pack. Like, this nation is representative government. That's why you elect your aldermen and all that. But we're also a nation of special interests. That's why the gays, the women, the Hispanics, everybody else gets what they want. I'm not even addressing the reparations because if you don't have a gang to bang for you and say, man, this is what we want, then it doesn't really matter. So it comes right back down to not necessarily community organization, but money. Who gonna pay off the order? Who gonna pay off the state rep? Where's the PAC? You know what I'm saying? I'm just wondering if anybody in here has a PAC.
We do have a PAC to start. Yeah, we do.
You're not talking about that.
No, I ain't talking about that
I just wanted to ask a question about how we get the media to start listening to people. Because I'm thinking of the example when Trump came to Englewood, he would just sort of say, "This is how," and not really understand, not say anything more, just no backing or no understanding. And then Hillary Clinton's response to that is say, "Well, go to Kenwood and see all the, see what's going on there. You have prosperity and things going on." But why aren't they talking? Why aren't you in that conversation when the Green Party is polling better in the black community than Donald Trump is? But they don't talk to you, and you were the only person you know the most about it. But they're not talking to you, and you're the most qualified person to talk on the subject. So, now how do we put pressure on people saying we need people who understand these issues the best and who have a certain amount of support in those communities to actually talk about those issues?
Great question. Two more questions? Anybody? Okay.
I was really struck by you bringing up the fact that class is no longer sort of a part of the political discussion anymore. I think Bernie Sanders definitely showed that economic populism, a class-based analysis, is popular. It was portrayed as really resonating with white voters, which is true, but he also did better among black millennials than he did among white millennials, who also have much different views on class, a more negative view of capitalism. I'm wondering, how does the Green Party sort of get that message out and build on that momentum and sort of bring that class economic-based message broader?
I have a question. If you could explain, in your words, what the current economic system that we live in today, because I think that would be helpful for understanding what is the economic system nationally, globally that currently exists today, and how do we fight against that system?
I'm gonna sleep good tonight. These are very, very important questions. And these are the kinds of conversations we have to have here in this country. And the kind of conversations we have to have in our communities. The kind of clarity that we get from these conversations help us to devise the kinds of strategies we need to go forward. So I welcome these questions. The Green Party believes in terms of economic development that, again, we believe and support the idea of community-based power. That real community-based power begins with folks who are able to take, to the extent that they can, their own economic destiny in their hands at the lowest level, at the community level. And there's some marvelous examples of that taking place across the country. We have a policy that says that if we were able to seize power, we would use federal or national resources to provide direct assistance to community-based organizations that are involved in innovative local economic development projects. We have a position that says that we're going to provide direct support to groups, organizations that are developing co-ops. We're going to provide some direct assistance to groups that are, again, involved in collective processes of developing small business. So we recognize that in the context of a capitalist society, that the driving engine for job creation is, in fact, small and medium business. We recognize that. And so we're going to support that as we go through a transition, transitional economic process. Global economics. Well, you know, it goes to your question. What is it that what kind of economic system do we have, domestically and globally? Well, we have a hegemony of the capitalist system. This is a capitalist society, a capitalist economy, and we have global capitalist relations. Capitalism developed as a consequence of the European invasion of the Americas and the creation of the slave trade and the genocide against indigenous folks to take the labor in order to take the land, in order to put the labor to work on that land and to begin to accumulate enormous resources that then ended up being used to develop the industrial base of Europe. I am the gradual transformation to certain kinds of relationships in which folks without property ended up having to work for folks who own property or the means of production. And that is the system that we have today. And not only are we talking about a certain kind of economic system, a certain kind of economic relationship, but a certain kind of culture. Because a capitalist society creates capitalist values, capitalist practices, capitalist cultural practices, all geared to reinforce the system. You know? So when we talk about doing away with oppression, we have to deal with the fact that some people think that oppression is natural, that there are winners and losers, that they live in a free society, and that this is the ultimate expression of freedom, and that your value as a human being is reflected in where you end up in life. So if you are rich, that means you just worked hard, you have some superior values. If you end up poor, you don't look at the system, you look at yourself. One of the most effective hustles they ever created. Okay? So that is a kind of ideological domination, the kind of the creation of a kind of consciousness that ensures support for this backward system. It appears to be natural, the natural way in which society should function. So when we talk about doing away with oppression, we've got to talk about how do we change our understanding of the society, our understanding of ourselves, our understanding of what in fact is possible. You know, because they'll tell us. I had a conversation just yesterday with a young man who said that this system is organized because it reflects human nature. That human beings are naturally competitive. Human beings are naturally materialistic and individualistic. That's just how we are. Now, you can show an abundance of evidence to demonstrate that if that was the case, we would have probably created something called capitalism, 9,000 years ago. But it didn't happen. The vast expanse of human behavior has shown that human beings are naturally cooperative, that we work in units, we are naturally social, that materialism and individualism is a relatively new creation. It's not reflected in anything we can call human nature. So these are some of the things we have to struggle against when we talk about what kind of society we have to build. We live in a capitalist society, we have global capitalism, and we want to address the issues that impact our people negatively. We got to address capitalism. We got to change it, transform it, and overthrow it. Reparations. This is connected, in my opinion. The Green Party is the only major party that has in its platform, in its principles, support for reparations. Simple as that. We believe in repair. We believe in reparations. Now, what form that takes, we can talk about that. Now, for me, reparations, in my opinion, is not going to come within the context of the present system. That the only way there's going to be reparations, that has to be part of that revolutionary transition. That is when the people finally seize power. And we begin the process of repair, collective repair, for ourselves, for the indigenous, that process of having real social justice, that process of a conversation around what will be the United States of America, what form will it take? Because it's not going to remain in the form it is today, okay? At that moment, we can talk about reparations, both domestically, but also reparations in terms of how the U.S. should repair its relations with other nations and other people, okay? So reparations can't just be seen as something that is relevant to the U.S., all right? So that's my position on reparations. But again, as a party, we are in full support of the idea of reparations. Why don't we have more support in this society? Quite simply, and people have talked about it a few times, we are the victims of a whiteout. You know, they don't want our ideals, our analysis to be exposed to the people of this country. You know, we don't have the ability to buy up a lot of ad time. Plus, because the corporations that control the flow of mainstream information, they're determined that there's only going to be two parties, and those two parties are the ones that get all the attention. So you have Donald Trump, when they created Donald Trump as a candidate, they did that. He gets about $4 billion worth of free media. Hillary Clinton, about $2 billion. The Green Party, what? Nothing. We got the CNN Talk Town Hall. We had a C-SPAN Town Hall. We've had some, interviews. We've gotten mainly from the mainstream attacks. You know, Jill Stein and myself, we've been attacked by every major outlet in this country. New York Times, Washington Post, the LA Times, you name it. You know, we've been attacked because what they were trying to do is to undermine the morality of our campaign. You know, constructing this sort of loony left narrative, right? So the only mainstream attention we get and got was in fact in the form of attacks. That's why we have not been able to get our message across effectively. We knew, and I think they knew, that if we had a chance to participate in the debate, that if Jill Stein would have been able to stand next to Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and I would have had a chance to stand next to Tim Kaine and Mike Pence, that not only would we have been competitive, well, we could have won this thing. Now we're going to partially correct some of that. This will be a major program on November the 2nd in North Carolina. The millennial,
2016 Millennial Voters Forum.
In Charlotte, North Carolina. They invited, and Tim Kaine accepted, and Bob Well from the Libertarians will be there. But something very curious happened. They were organizing this debate or whatever, town hall. But the young people started making a demand. And guess what they demanded? They demanded that Ajamu Baraka be invited. So the people responded. So we will be part of that conversation on November the 2nd, and we are definitely looking out for that. If we would have had a chance to, if we want to construct a politics that's relevant and is going to take us forward, if we want to have an analysis in terms of why people make the kind of decisions they make, if we are going to have a framework in which we can understand where people are landing in terms of what interests they are prepared to uphold, we definitely have to include in our framework of understanding race and gender and nationality and sexuality. We've got to include the notion and the concept of class. And that's very, very essential in my opinion. Because if not, then basically we would find ourselves confused and supporting elements that do not have our best interests at hand. So these are the kind of things we have to do in terms of, again, having the kind of framework we need to have to construct the kind of politics we have to construct. And people are engaged in developing this kind of framework across this country and really around the world. There's some very exciting things that people are involved in. And in particular, my friends, black communities outside this country. Before I joined this campaign in August, I was living in South America, in Colombia, for about 4 years, and working with the black movement in Colombia and throughout the Americas. And I had a chance to witness firsthand some powerful movements and some innovative strategies for building independent power. And it's funny because, people outside this country, they know more about our politics and our history than we do. So they know about, the black movement and all of that. And they always say, we have so much we can learn from you. And I'm thinking to myself, we don't want you. We should be the students because you are doing some fantastic work. So there are things happening around this globe, and we have to link into them and re-embrace the black internationalist perspective and posture that's always characterized black politics. We've never just been internally focused sort of Negroes. Never. We've always had an internationalist perspective. All right. So in some ways, I was just joking about the questions because that's part of our tradition to raise questions about the global economy and to try to understand what's happening throughout the world and to make those connections. That's the kind of sophistication that we've always had. And it's really so gratifying to see folks moving back to that. So my friends, I hope that I did some justice to all of these questions and trying to understand my scribble. I hope that we can, and you continue to talk about and understand how all these issues connect. I want to leave you with this notion that this fight that we are involved in this country, again, has a global dimension. That when we talk about white supremacy, that we're not just talking about attitudes, we're talking about structures. And we have to understand that we are up against global structures of white supremacy. And we have to identify some of those structures. We have to recognize that, for example, the IMF is part of that. The World Trade Organization is part of that. The World Bank, even sometimes elements of the UN. We have to recognize we have this international cartel of bankers as part of this. And all of these Western U.S. corporations, this is where power is concentrated. These are the folks who are prepared to maintain the hegemony by any means necessary. And so when we talk about revolutionary change, we have to recognize and understand who the real enemy is. So I'll leave you on that, and we have more stuff to talk about.